Today we will be talking about the 9th of the 10 Yamas, Mitāhāra. Mitāhāra means a moderate appetite. Or this could apply to food. This could also apply to other sensory impressions that we take in. People are constantly taking in these sensory impressions, and this could apply as well. The diet is a very important concept in yoga, but so also this concept applies to everything else that we do. People are always on their telephone now, looking always at the distraction from their inner thoughts and feelings. They're not practicing yoga. Yoga trains us to look inwardly, and they're focusing outwardly. And that's really the difficulty with taking in an excess of sensory impressions, whether it's drugs or narcotics, CBD, taking different substances, getting too much pampering of the physical body, taking baths and getting massage and this kind of thing. If we do this often as a distraction, this is bad. Too much new clothing and all this kind of thing can qualify. This is all sensory outward stimulation. So being on the phone all day long, looking always at the different updates on Facebook. It's an endless scroll they have now. And we can just keep looking and looking, and it's very addictive to people. And so we need to be moderate in all these kind of things. If there's a use for the telephone, we can use it. If a person has a physical injury and pain and they need a massage to help, or a bath to help ease the soreness of the muscles, this can be good. But if a person overdoes it, it gets them focused very much outwardly. And of course, the sexual indulgence and everything can apply here. But so we'll talk in depth about the food. It's important to have the moderate appetite. And there are many people now who are doing the opposite. They're fasting. The tendency in general is for people to overeat. We eat more than we need to eat. And Ayurveda has a very simple description of why people have the tendency to do this. When we have emotions that we're having trouble to face and process, difficult emotions like fear, anger, sadness, this kind of thing, there's a tendency to repress it. And the different repressed emotions will go to specific organs in the body. Ayurveda has knowledge of this. The liver holds repressed anger. The kidneys hold repressed fear. The stomach holds a repressed sense of a lack of fulfillment. The lungs hold repressed grief, etc., etc. All the different organs, they hold specific repressed emotions. And so when we repress the anger, it damages the liver. Or vice versa, when we have damage to the liver, it causes anger to come about. And so if we take the herbs that's good for the liver, for example, then we have a purging, and a person might start urinating, and they urinate out toxins from the liver, and they start feeling anger, and the anger is purged from the subconscious mind. This happens also when we do our meditation, when we sit in practice. These intense emotions that we've been hiding from for years and maybe lifetimes start to come up. It's way more intense than people are ever prepared for. But if we do the opposite, we change the diet and we eat the foods that are bad for the liver, that clog up the liver, it will keep the toxins in, and it will keep the emotions repressed. And so that's why people start craving the foods that are bad for them when they have a disease condition in the body. That's why people who are anxious are eating the foods that aggravate Vata dosha. People who have a lot of anxiety will be drawn toward eating raw foods and salad and dal and things like this. And people with a lot of pitta will be eating fried, spicy foods and maybe a lot of red meat and this kind of thing. And so this helps to keep these emotions repressed. That's why it's very important to have the moderate appetite to eat foods which is very healthy. But we have a tendency now in the West for people to fast, and they're fasting too much. There are people practicing yoga also who are fasting too much. And they say the great yogis can go without food. So let me go without food, and it's not a wholesome practice. This is not the practice of Mitāhāra, not the practice of moderate diet. It's a practice of excess. It's not an effective practice. I go to the health food stores and I see these herbal remedies, and they say it's very powerful, it's a colon cleanse and this kind of thing. And I understand the properties of the medicinal herbs, and I look at the formulation, and it's very powerful, very potent. It's too powerful, in fact. If you take too much of poison even, your body will sometimes not even digest it. It will just pass out the other side. And so if we take too much of the laxative herbs, also it won't have a laxative effect. It will cause us to become constipated. It won't have that effect because it's an excess, too much, more than the body can handle. It would be too intense of a purging, so the body just can't do it. It doesn't try. Same with fasting too much. If you eat an excess of food, you could fast a little bit, one day in a month on a sacred day, maybe on Mahapradosham, Ekadashi day or something. Well, some sacred day you could fast and maybe benefit, and it'll reset the digestion and help you to clear out the toxins. But we need not fast entirely from food. We could eat a simple mono-fast, eating just the sabudana, the tapioca pearls, cooked very simply with some digestive spices. Very light, very nourishing, but it will help to clear the toxins from the system. We can't overdo it, and that's the problem, is people are tending to overdo it, and then they're not getting the right effects. They want to feel good. They don't realize the practice of yoga brings them into contact with the negative feelings within. They're trying to hide from them. It's the instinct. We've got to overcome those instincts. The instinct of the mind, the instinct of the body is to heal itself. But the instinct of the mind is to keep us safe from all these negative feelings. And so that's where we get this prajna parada, this forgetting of our divine nature, forgetting of our higher healing wisdom that we have inherently within our human consciousness. We act against it. In nature, animals, they get sick and they'll go and eat the medicinal herbs that make them better. But people, they'll eat poison. If you give them poison with good faith, they'll take it, they'll eat it. They don't notice that it's poisoning them. An animal in the wild wouldn't eat poison. They'd smell it and go away. They wouldn't even take a taste and spit it out. But humans, they don't have this higher awareness. They're not in touch with it because they're hiding so much from what they're feeling. So even when people are fasting, they're overdoing it. And a lot of people fast because they want to be very thin. And so it's really dieting, and that we've got to overcome these mental illnesses that give us a bad body image. We can't do anything in the world to help us overcome this low self-esteem having to do with body image. You can put on all the makeup in the world, you can have all the pretty clothing, you can fast and starve yourself and cause yourself to vomit and become thin like a skeleton. But the people with this mental illness, they still view themselves as overweight and unattractive. There's nothing they can do to make themselves beautiful, because really, they are beautiful already. It's an inner feeling that needs to be shifted, not the outer situation. Any amount of money you put into makeup and clothing and all this kind of thing, it only makes the problem worse. Instead, you've got to change the inner feeling by sitting in the mirror and looking at yourself and smiling and saying, I love you. You are beautiful. I love you. You are beautiful. I love you. You are beautiful. If you can say it and try to feel it every day for a few minutes, it helps overcome these difficulties that lead to eating disorders. I'll share a story. There was one student, the whole family I was working with and teaching some, and one son was very spiritual, and he decided he wanted to fast entirely from food and water. And he told his mother this, and his mother had heard of yogis in India, this Indian family. And so she thought, oh, well, this may be okay, you know, but several days into it or whatever, she thought, well, he's really sticking with this. I thought he might do it for just lunchtime and eat the dinner, but he kept doing it next day. And so she called me and she said, Swamiji, is this safe? Should he do this? Is this okay? And I spoke to him and I said, I don't know that this is a good idea. Even our Shastras say, the Upanishads say, the Vedas, the Upanishads say, don't give up food. Eat food and give food to those who are hungry. You should not renounce food. Our Upanishads say we need to take the nourishment so long as we have the physical body. We shouldn't use siddhis. You can use siddhis, but we shouldn't use siddhis to manipulate things in the material world. Use the siddhis to go deeper into your meditation. Don't use the siddhis to feed the body. It's a waste of energy. You're becoming to less realization because you're dissipating that spiritual energy that you've built up in your sadhana, trying to do these stupid mystical things to manipulate matter. Sure, you can move a piece of matter with your mind. It's very easy. Very, very easy. A person could learn to do, any person with ample practice could learn to do that in a year's time. But it would take many years, 12 years, 20 years to realize the self within. It's very difficult. Very, very, very difficult. We shouldn't waste any of this spiritual energy that we build up in our practice that could be feeding and fueling our meditations. We shouldn't waste it. But in any event, I told him all these things, and he said, no, I'm feeling really good. I think it's a good practice. I want to fast from food and from water entirely. And so I said, okay, well, if you insist, go ahead and do it, but call me every day. Let me know how it's going. And after a few days, he was feeling very, very badly. And he didn't go to school that day. He stayed at home laying in bed. He felt just terrible. And I said to him, well, I said, well, why don't you stop? And he said, well, it's still helping me spiritually. I should continue. I said, it's not helping you. It's hurting you physically, and that's hurting you mentally, and then you can't do your spiritual practice. I asked him, what practice have you done today? He said, I've done nothing. So he didn't do his work for school. He didn't go to school. He couldn't walk. He didn't have the strength. And he wasn't doing his spiritual practice. So I convinced him to stop. I said, maybe the Lord is not behind this intense fasting. I said, why don't you do a simple fast? Simple mono fast. This will nourish your body, give you what you need, and it will clear out all the toxins from the physical system, and it will be a spiritual discipline. I said, why don't you just eat only khichdi and water? Just take plain water and khichdi. And his mother, very, very loving mother, was happy to cook him khichdi 3 times a day. And so he started eating the khichdi, and after one day, he was like, Swamiji, it's too much, I can't take it. The negative thoughts are coming up, the toxins are coming out of the physical body. It's too intense, I can't take it. So with the moderate diet, he was having great, great spiritual effects, and he couldn't tolerate it. He didn't want it. But with the excess, he was only hurting himself and having no spiritual benefits at all. And so we really need to look at examples like that and eat a moderate diet. We should eat according to our Ayurvedic doshic constitution, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And if you don't know what your dosha is, go to an Ayurvedic doctor, have him take your pulse, and he can tell you, and he can give you advice on what to eat. And there's many books on the subject as well. That's the way you can easily tell. The online tests, you may get some idea, but probably not. You'll probably get the wrong idea. It's better to go to an Ayurvedic doctor, have him take your pulse, because it's easy to misunderstand the questions and to answer wrong and get the wrong idea about your doshas. But if we eat the foods that are good for our particular constitution, then we will benefit ourselves and we'll develop a sattvic mind, and we will go within. It's really when we eat in excess or deficiency that we have the health problems that lead to the mental problems that prevent our spiritual practice. Most people are having these kind of health problems. Chronic malabsorption is very common throughout the world today. People are suffering from malnourishment, undernutrition, undernourishment. And so fasting really is not as important of a practice as continuing to eat healthy foods regularly. We need to cook fresh foods. We need to eat local organic foods if we can get them, if we can afford them. Throughout the year, we should try to find those foods which are in season, that are grown locally, organically, and we should favor those when possible, but always get the fresh ingredients. Avoid chemicals. Avoid preservatives, avoid all these additives and coloring agents and things. We should eat fresh, natural foods, and the foods that are best to support the yoga practice typically are those which are very sattvic in nature, those that lead to a balanced mental state. And so this is foods like fresh fruits, or it could be cooked, and milk and fresh dairy like this, and grains like rice and wheat, and nuts are very sattvic. And so these are some of the best foods for supporting the yoga practice. But we need a balanced diet with some amount of protein foods like dals and nuts and things, and we need some vegetables. And of course, the meat is not sattvic at all. The meat is very tamasic. And that's the main reason in yoga we don't eat it. In yoga, what do? We go into the subconscious mind and we see what's in there and we witness it so it can pass. And then we go beyond that to the higher levels of the superconscious mind. We start to develop the siddhis that they talk about in the yoga shastras. We have mystical knowledge, occult powers, all these things. Only if we can go through the veil of the subconscious mind. So we have to go in and feel these things. We need a very clear mind to do so. And, there's a lot of emotions from this lifetime that's been repressed, from every past lifetime that's been repressed. We don't need more emotions. What happens when we ingest meat? Of course, the scientists now, they say that for every emotion, there's corresponding hormones in the body. The body will make these hormones. If you're accustomed to being angry every day your body will make the hormones. You don't need a reason to become angry. You'll just be angry out of habit because your body has trained itself to produce those particular hormones. The same hormones have been found in the animals. And what do? They go into the flesh. So when you take the animal to the slaughterhouse, it's feeling a lot of fear, feeling a lot of confusion, feeling a lot of anger. All these hormones go into the meat, and when we eat it, we ingest that. And so we have to feel that then also. But then also there's a lot of karmic repercussions to eating of meat. It's a very wasteful industry. They feed a lot of grains to the cattle, for example. And if you take 100 pounds of grains and you feed it to the cattle, it might produce 1 pound of meat. It's reduced. I don't know the exact proportion. You can Google that. I don't know all the statistics. But it's something like this, and the concept definitely holds true. You could feed people 100 pounds of grains and 100 people be fed. You can feed one person a pound of meat because it requires that much of grains. But then all the water that it requires to water those grains, and the water it requires to feed that cattle. And then they're cutting down the forests so they can have grazing land for the cattle. And they're cutting down the rainforests. And it's affecting the environment and affecting the climate. It's a very wasteful, harmful industry. There's nothing better that a person could do for the environment than to adopt a vegetarian diet and to avoid meat eating entirely. So meat eating is not moderate at all. Meat eating is very excessive. It's very, very, very excessive. And so, it's very important for the practice of ahimsa, nonviolence, to avoid meat. But it's very, very important in the practice of Mitāhāra, also moderate eating. We've got to eat fresh, local, natural, simple foods. And the yogis eat less, and the yogis sleep less. Normal person, they're very tamasic, dull in their mind. They may sleep 10 hours a day. How do you overcome that tamas? Set the alarm clock earlier, get up earlier, sleep less. Eat a little smaller portion of food possibly. If you're eating too much food, Ayurveda has a recommendation. Ayurveda says that your stomach can hold, if you put all the food heaping in your cupped hands like this, the heaping food, your stomach can literally, it can fit 3 of this. Ayurveda says in a meal, eat 1 of this of food, drink 1 of this of liquid, and leave 1 quantity like this open for digestion. You need the samana vayu, the movement of digestion, to be able to move around those foods so you can digest it. When we're overeating, we won't be healthy, we won't be clear in our minds, we won't be able to practice our yoga. So studying Ayurveda can give us some good insight. Ayurveda has some clues to understand if you're digesting the food properly. We can look if there's a coating on the tongue. we know that the food is remaining undigested and we need to take the dosha-specific digestive herbs, or we need to be eating better foods, and we need to be worrying less and sit and eat and allow time to digest. If you eat when you're hungry, until you're satisfied truly, and then you wait until you digest your food and you eat again, you'll be healthy. You should eat what you can digest. But we don't know what we can digest, and there's so much emotional eating happening. People eat a meal and then they feel emotional and they want to snack right after the meal. They're not really hungry. So we have to learn to differentiate between the emotional appetite and the actual appetite, and we need to pay attention to the body and digest, and we'll feel better, and we'll be able to do more work in our lives, and we'll be able to go deeper in our meditation. So the moderate appetite, but moderation of all things. If you have one nice car, you don't need 2 cars. A lot of my neighbors around here, they have 15 cars in their yard. You don't need 15 cars if you're one person. Maybe 2 cars, maybe you have a pickup truck for moving things around the farm, and maybe that pickup truck is big and uses a lot of gas, and so it makes more sense when you have to drive a distance to the city to have a small sedan. It's gas efficient. There could be a reason to have a couple of vehicles. Maybe you need a tractor also to plow the land, but we don't need 15 cars. We don't need 30 pairs of shoes. We don't need 50 outfits to wear. We don't need all these things. We don't need all these things. If we have a house, we don't need a vacation house and a third house and all. One house is usually fine for a person. And don't get me wrong, there can be a time that it's useful to have some of these things, and there can be a time it could not be considered excess. But really, for the practice of yoga, we've got to be very extreme in our practice of moderation. We don't want to have any excessive pleasures or luxuries in the world. So, like the yogis of old times, have one blanket, wool blanket, and sleep on the hard floor, and eat a simple diet, small meals. Drink water, don't drink soft drinks, soda, coffee, tea. Drink pure water, pure herbal teas, tulsi tea. Eat nice, healthy food. Don't eat a bunch of sweet foods. Just eat healthy, and it makes a big difference in our practice. The other thing is then, we don't have so much satisfaction in the material realm. We're not thinking, oh, let me go get another good meal. That was so tasty. Let me go get a good meal. That was so fun. That was, oh, I feel so good to lay down in the comfy bed. Let me lay down in bed. And we become lazy, and we become full of desire. When we're a little bit dissatisfied, still a little bit hungry, we're not thinking we're going to find fulfillment in the world. We're thinking, wow, the world is lacking fulfillment. And so what do? Naturally, we look within for fulfillment. When we're thoroughly frustrated with the world and there's no fulfillment there, then it's natural to look within. Otherwise, if we're finding this temporary fulfillment, we'll keep chasing after it. So in yoga, we retrain ourselves by being very extremely moderate in all of our sensory intake, in all of our activities, in all of our pursuits. We be moderate. Okay. Om Namah Shivaya.